In 2011, 18-year-old Taylor Van Diest was on her way home from a costume party in the small town of Armstrong in the Okanagan Territory of Canada. The town of 5,000 was traumatized when Taylor's body was found by the railway tracks, having been brutally beaten. She was unable to identify her attacker before eventually succumbing to her injuries. She had sent a text to her boyfriend telling him that someone had been following her before dropping out of contact altogether. Police then used DNA found at the crime scene to arrest Matthew Forster for the frenzied attack, and also took his father into custody for helping to cover up the crime. After a night spent greeting trick-or-treaters in Napa, California, Lauren Mianza and her roommates Leslie Mazzara and Adrian Inzonia went to bed. Lauren was woken in the early hours of the morning by sounds of a struggle upstairs in the house. She hid in the backyard and watched as someone climbed out of a back window. She returned to the house to find both Leslie and Adrian viciously stabbed to death in their beds. Although it took more than a year, DNA evidence from cigarette butts near the scene pointed the finger at Eric Koppel, the fiancé of one of Adrian's friends, who had believed that their friendship threatened the wedding. 7-year-old Tony Bagley was getting ready for a night of trick-or-treating in Las Vegas, Nevada in 1994 when a masked gunman ran up to Tony, his sister, his aunt, and his mother, and opened fire on them. The man leapt into a waiting car and sped off, leaving little Tony dead and the family horribly wounded. The killer was never caught, and police can only speculate about why the crime was committed. The last words that Los Angeles resident Peter Fabiano heard as he opened his front door in 1975 were "trick or treat." He opened it to reveal an adult wearing a full disguise who leveled a pistol disguised in a brown paper bag and shot him in the chest. It turned out that the murderer was a woman named Goldine Pizer, whose friend Joan Rebel had developed a crush on Fabiano's wife, Betty. Both women were jailed for second-degree murder. In Pasadena, California in 1993, 3 teenagers, Stephen Coates, Reggie Crawford, both 14, and Edgar Evans, just 13 years old, were murdered as they walked home from a Halloween party. Members of the Bloods gang opened fire on the group in retaliation for a murder carried out by the Crips earlier in the night. As it turned out, the gang had picked on the wrong group of teens, having intended to shoot a group further down the block. 3 of the gang were caught and found guilty of first-degree murder. In 1975, young Martha Moxley had been attending a neighbor's Halloween party. However, when she was found in the backyard of her home in Greenwich, Connecticut, she was partially naked and had been beaten to death with a golf club. It took 27 years for the murderer to be brought to justice. A man called Michael Skakel was convicted of the murder in 2002 and sentenced to 20 years to life. However, Skakel was released on bail, thought to be due to his family connection to the Kennedys, and is currently awaiting a retrial for the crime. In 2009, 3 teenage girls were taken hostage by a lone assailant on their way home from trick-or-treating in Woodbridge, Virginia. He threatened them with a gun and managed to sexually assault 2 of the girls before the third managed to contact her mother using her cell phone. Aaron Thomas, who had become known as the East Coast rapist for a string of horrifying assaults, was caught and convicted of these and dozens of other assaults over 12 years. He tried to commit suicide in his cell, but failed. Devon Griffin discovered a gory scene in 2010, initially believing that the scene of his family's murder was of a Halloween prank. However, he was wrong and had just lost his mother, brother, and stepfather. His stepfather, William Liskey Jr., had broken into the family home in Martin, Ohio, and murdered them all in a frenzied attack. Anyone who has ever been pelted by something or had their house TP'd at Halloween will know that the holiday is often a time for the most committed of pranksters to have their fun. But 21-year-old Carl Jackson of the Bronx, New York, found that some pranks are more dangerous than others. When he went with his girlfriend to pick up her 9-year-old son from a party, their car was pelted with eggs. Jackson got out of the car and exchanged some angry words with the group. One of them pulled out a gun, and as Jackson got back into his car, he was shot in the head, killing him instantly. They were never caught. The one Halloween story which keeps coming back year after year is the story of trick-or-treaters' candy being tampered with in some way. You often hear of spider eggs in bubblegum, razor blades being pushed into apples, and even poison being injected into soft candy. Most of these are complete rubbish, but that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. After trick-or-treating in Deer Park, Texas in 1974, 8-year-old Timothy O'Brien started to tuck into his Halloween haul, but began to have a seizure and eventually died despite being rushed to hospital. It turned out that his own father had poisoned the candy. Knee-deep in debt, Ronald O'Brien was trying to cash in a life insurance policy on his own children by lacing their candy with cyanide. The homicidal Halloween father was put to death by lethal injection a few years later.